Have you read Galatians? I think by now we've all heard this seemingly conditioned response from modern Christianity when discussing believers today keeping the Torah, the Hebrew word for instruction. Many immediately point to the writings of Sha'ul or Paul as evidence that believers today are no longer under the law.
We are not under the law.
Christians are not under the law.
But did Paul really teach that followers of the Messiah do not have to obey the instructions of the Most High? I don't think so. I believe that in order to understand what Paul said, you must have a foundation in what Paul read. Paul was a Torah-observant Hebrew, and his letters were written from a Hebraic perspective in the first century. Many fail to consider that the only scripture Paul ever referenced was the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Paul was a Pharisee who was incredibly versed in the Torah. Statements like, "Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that need not be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth." 2 Timothy 2:15. And, "All scripture is God-breathed, and is useful for instruction, for conviction, for correction, and for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be complete, fully equipped for every good work." 2 Timothy 3:16-17. Are both referring to the Tanakh. Think about it. The New Testament did not even exist when these statements were made. Remember, Torah is simply the Hebrew word for instruction. The Most High gave His children righteous instructions for living to set us apart as a light for the other nations. The Messiah said, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they set it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." That's Matthew 5:14-16. I don't believe it's a coincidence that the Messiah says in the very next verse, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For I tell you truly, until the heavens and earth pass away, not a single jot, not a stroke of a pen will disappear from the Torah until everything is accomplished. So then, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do likewise will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5:17-20. Do you really believe Paul will be called least in the kingdom of heaven? Modern Christianity falsely teaches that Paul preached against the Torah of Yahuwah. But through some simple research, some basic word study, and most importantly understanding the context of Paul's letters, you will quickly find that Paul never taught against the law of God, but instead that he taught and followed the Torah. Just like the Messiah, Paul actively spoke against the traditions of men that were being put above the Torah. Are you doing what Kepha or Peter warned us about? Consider also that our Master's patience brings salvation, just as our beloved brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom God gave him. He writes this way in all his letters, speaking in them about such matters. Some parts of his letters are hard to understand, which unlearned and unstable people distort, as they do the rest of the scriptures, to their own destruction. Therefore, beloved, since you already know these things, be on your guard, so that you will not be carried away by the error of the lawless and fall from your secure standing. That's 2 Peter 3:15-17. Did you catch it? This is literally the only verse in all of Scripture that actually warns us about other Scripture. Peter is literally warning us that the unlearned and unstable will twist the letters of Paul into lawlessness, just as they do with other Scripture, to their own destruction. Paul kept the Torah and taught others to do the same. His writings are full of rhetorical questions and lengthy spiritual reasoning, which often confuses unlearned believers, especially those who read them through the lens of modern Christianity's lawless 21st century understanding, and not through the truth, which is the first century Hebraic lens of the Torah. Again, Peter said that Paul's letters are hard to understand, and those with no foundation in the Torah will easily be led astray by lawless men who twist the New Testament writings like they do with other scripture. Did Paul really preach against the Torah? Let's examine the evidence and allow Scripture to speak for itself.
Paul believed everything written in the Torah.
But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship Yahuwah, the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the Torah and written in the prophets. Acts 24:14.
Paul taught from the Torah.
So they arranged a day with him and came to his quarters in large numbers. From morning until evening he explained the matter to them, giving a thorough witness about the kingdom of Yahuwah and making use of both the Torah of Moshe and the prophets to persuade them about Yahusha. Acts 28:23.
Paul obeyed the Torah.
Take them with you, be purified with them, and pay the expenses connected with having their head shaved. Then everyone will know that there is nothing to these rumors which they have heard about you, but that on the contrary, you yourself walk orderly and keep the Torah. Acts 21:24.
Paul kept the Sabbath.
And Paul entered the synagogue, as was his custom, and for 3 Sabbaths he engaged in discussion and friendly debate with them from the Scriptures. And he reasoned and debated in the synagogue every Sabbath, trying to persuade Jews and Gentiles. Acts 17:2.
Paul taught the Sabbath remains.
There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Hebrews 4:9-11.
Paul kept and taught the Leviticus 23 feasts.
I must by all means keep this feast that comes in Jerusalem. Acts 18:21. We sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, or Passover week, and within 5 days we reached them at Troas, where we stayed for 7 days. Acts 20:6. For Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus, because he would not spend time in Asia, for he hasted, if it were possible for him, to be at Jerusalem the day of Shavuot. Acts 20:16. For even Messiah, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. 1 Corinthians 5:7-8.
Paul delighted in the Torah.
For I delight in the Torah of Yahuwah after the inward man. Romans 7:22.
Paul taught that the Torah is set apart, just, and good.
Wherefore the Torah is set apart, and the commandments set apart, and just, and good. Romans 7:12.
Paul taught that our faith does not make void the Torah.
Do we then make void the Torah by this faith? God forbid. Rather, we uphold the Torah. Romans 3:31. Thank you for watching. I pray this video has been a blessing. Watch out for part 2 of this series. The Most High willing, we post new content every single week. Hit that like button and subscribe for more scripture and context. Shalom.